Just recording
All
in
right.
progress.
Okay.
All right. So, Rick, hey, it's California Times. That's me, Guy Meyer, here. My TV show, internet show is still going on, and it's Friday. Um, and I've got my good friend Rick Johnson to come in and chat with me about a bunch of things going on here in California and our little world. And because Rick is so good to like send me articles that catch his eye and merit like some attention. We're going to go through about five of these, or try to go through five of these recent articles that Rick has sent me. How you doing, Rick? By the way.
Doing great. Doing great. Not so great after the state vote on the governor signing SB9 and SB10, but
Yeah.
we'll get them one way or another.
Yeah. No, it does seem extremely painful, very depressing to me too. That this seems to have just rolled, like California's been rolled. That's what
Yeah.
I feel like. We just uh, our inability to question where we're going, or I guess our fear of. I think even the few people who question where we're going have so much fear of quote a Republican alternative, and maybe they're justified. I'm not 100% sure, but I've actually, no, maybe I am sure. But anyways,
No, I think you got a point. But I would flip it around and I'd say uh, you almost have to be like a Democrat, because a Democrat does not stand around like Hamlet and figure out what they're going to do. They know what they're going to do. Republicans, on the other hand, they want to be liked, and that's a tremendous flaw that they have.
well,
Because
that's fascinating that you put it that way. Certainly, over the years, nobody, I think, in the Democratic world would think of it like that. The Republicans represent Hamlet, but yet,
oh yeah,
but yet, in this last year of this so-called Republican recall, you have to. I mean, I'm not a registered Republican. I'm still seeking some kind of sense of what is a an environmental Republican. And when I say Republican, I'm thinking of the fundamental terms of like um, individual liberty and responsibility, something that goes back through the years. Uh, but that there was no cohesion whatsoever. That you have these seven or whatever random voices who all jumped in. Like the question was, is there a party, actual party that could?
I honestly think that there are two parts to the party. The first part is the country club set, and I'll just say the George Bushes of the world, and guys that were in Skull and Bones at Yale and all this other stuff. Then there's the other half, that's the working Joe that's out there, and they're just trying to follow somebody that taxes them the least.
Right.
So
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I feel like it's, to me, it's the sense of the people, and now it crosses party lines, and maybe it's been that way for quite some time, but the people that would just sell off your own community to make some bucks and declare it to be my right to do that. The
yeah,
corporate uh, class that I felt years ago that would be the Republican experience, as well as those who, in 1972, for instance, in this Look magazine poll I'm looking at, that finding this ancient copy, that 85% of Republicans were supportive of the Vietnam War and 85% of Democrats were opposed to it. And it kind of marked a division of like where the Republicans were buying this military adventurousness back then. And I think things have kind of flipped right now. And I think that there's sort of like we're I think the Democratic controlled adventurousness has become so dominant that it's an opportunity for Republicans or new Republicans, or maybe the working Joe Republicans, to really be the ones who are giving pushback against this kind of run the world program.
Well, I think there's neocons in both of the parties. I do, and certainly the vote that brought us Iraq. I mean, Afghanistan was plenty good. Didn't have to go to Iraq. Iraq could have been on its own. And what do you think they'd be doing today? They would be dead set against the Iranians, and we'd have our built-in buffer between Iran and and Israel, because they'd still be fighting with Iraq. Huge mistake going in there. Afghanistan, I could see go in there, get rid of the Taliban, turn it over to the warlords. If they want to fight amongst themselves, and go for it.
Yeah, well, it just seems to me it was, to me, doomed to failure. I would be against the Afghanistan adventure too. After all, it was our money that brought about the Taliban in the first place, and we supported them as the Mujahideen. Just the American coming out of 9/11, this Operation Enduring Freedom, the irony of that, and the kind of the inherent lie, almost, enduring freedom. What was that? What a ridiculous name to think that we were going to do that with the weight of our weapons. But anyways, we're getting off track. I mean, it was a corrupt mess there that we participated in Afghanistan. 50,000 Afghanis died because of our adventure. I think some 2,500 Americans.
Yeah, and the whole thing about that is enduring freedom. Yeah, it was really enduring. It was 20 years of enduring, and there was never, just as there was never an exit strategy for what would happen after the Russians got out, we didn't have any exit strategy either.
No,
with the Mujahideen, and and we still haven't had any strategy for getting out.
Oh, it's actually, we're going off topic, but you were just saying how you are all about that. You don't stick to a script, right? You were telling me that, right?
Right.
And I'm the role model of how not to stick to a script, apparently. I'm not sure it's good or bad, but just reading about Guantanamo and the mastermind of 9/11, bringing it all back down 20 years later.
Right.
This dude hasn't gotten a trial, and there's still questions about so many different aspects of 9/11.
You wouldn't want to say the Saudis, would you?
What is the element of how deep did we have any really desire to understand what went on? It seemed like fundamentally the 20 years of locking this guy away and not even giving him an opportunity to accuse somebody else, if he wants to make statements to accuse us or accuse anybody, give him the right. But 20 years in prison, now they're going to have the trial, but they say it's going to be very controlled. When I say now, I mean in 2022, they supposedly are going to start getting the jurors together. It just seems like it's just nobody wanted to hear the truth or the side of the guilty party. That
right. No, absolutely true. And but hey, how did we get? We went from we're Afghanistan to Guantanamo and
10
really
seconds, 2 seconds.
okay.
It's all connected. All right, jumping
Oh,
back into our original format. Tucker Carlson, Rick, you sent me a link to one
right,
of his talks. He had titled it, I think he titled it, according to the thing, was California Screaming.
right.
What did you see there? What did you hear him say? What?
Well, his point was we've got a state that yes, it needs affordable housing, and yes, it's going through drought, and yes, it's got forest fires and all this other stuff, and uh, they pass these housing bills that really are connected with something that is not that. I mean, it's not that vital right now. That if I were to, if he were to lump it together, he would say the drought would be number one. Maybe the housing would be number five, and you'd have all the different things that are falling apart in the state. Something he didn't mention was the EDD, the a division that hands out unemployment benefits, and how they got greased for $10 billion worth of unemployment benefits going to cons in the penitentiary right now.
It's where's my looking for my little thing about what here from Tucker's show? He says the real estate development firm Marcus was one of Newsom's biggest donors in the recent recall election. This week, after surviving the recall, tragically, Gavin Newsom rewarded those real estate developers the biggest, quote, housing bill ever. And these bills were endorsed by the California Building Industry Association, which represents, and this is Tucker Carlson's quotes from off his show, which represents, quote, the interest and builders and developers of housing and commercial projects. As the New York Times put it, quote, SB9 essentially ends single family zoning. Property owners now have the state's approval to convert any single family home in California into a 4-unit complex. How is this improving anyone's life? It won't. It means demolishing homes to put up rental units.
Right. A lot of what they did that in San Francisco from the mid 50s all the way into the 80s. And then they just ran out of single family there. I would say that in the Richmond district where I grew up, you got about maybe 15,000 people. And I would say that from the mid 50s, when it was 3-to-1 single family, I'd say it's 10-to-1 multiple units. And I told Susan one time, I said, one of the most favorite sports in San Francisco is staking out a parking place.
Yeah.
Because these places were built without any parking.
We're coming up, and I did a little couple of minute episode yesterday of bringing up this guy's quotes from 1965 about environment and overpopulation. That's where I'm coming from. I find it fascinating that Tucker Carlson in the year 2021 is now more of a voice for sustainability and environmentalism than the left is. I remember talking to a guy in my taxi cab in the late 1990s, maybe early 1990s, when this development in Ignacio, up and around in your neighborhood,
right,
that used to be the Army housing, was put in. And right. I mean, maybe my opposition to that type of at least in my mind, it wasn't any organized opposition, is nothing compared to the present. But I remember speaking to a guy who was working on the project. He was one of their managers, and he said to me, and he had a company that was coast to coast, probably even on the stock market, that built houses in America. And he says, "Don't quote me. Don't tell anybody that I said this, but we fuck America." Excuse me for putting this language in this video, but that's what he said to me. We bleep America. This is what we do. And anyhow, I think that goes on. Let's go to a lighter note, or I don't know if it's lighter or not, but Norm Macdonald passed away, and you sent me a link of Norm
Right.
Macdonald's humor. What
Right.
do you make of Norm Macdonald?
Well, I thought he was one of the most underappreciated comedians on SNL. And when he would do that weekend update, and I mean, as many times as he did it, he rolled over OJ. It was funny. And to my way of thinking, this sort of humor that has kind of, I know you can't do it on regular TV, but most of your humor these days, well, it's got to be politically correct, and that puts a lid on it. But number two, it's got to have the F word all the time. And this,
forgive me.
that, I mean, he could get through it. I mean, some of the stuff that he said was kind of in your face, but I got a kick out of him every time he was on.
Well, it's interesting. A couple of things, and just seeing that one clip that you sent me, which was from the 1990s, and apparently he was fired for perhaps reading Wikipedia, particularly because of his comments about OJ, but which he just during the course of the trial would make fun of him as being a murderer. Period.
Right.
But he also really went after Clinton. And in a kind of no holes barred slashing kind of humor about the corruption going on. It's interesting the role of the Hollywood comic in shaping popular opinion and late night comics, because I've not necessarily been a fan of it for many years, and maybe it's because of my lack of sense of humor. Or I'm still into it's a mad world. I've never got out of my 14-year-old sense of humor. But it seems like it's generally speaking a very political ha ha ha. Those are your bad guys, and we're what I'm saying.
Well, that's I would say
divisive humor.
I would say that's more these days than it was then.
Yeah.
But these days, very rarely will I watch late night to see what's going on, because it's canned, it's not clever, and I'm kind of like I'll tell you the best thing I saw on late night TV was it wasn't late night TV, but it was an interview of all people, Mo Howard.
Oh, wow.
And Mo Howard did a tour de force for about a half an hour on what it was like to get the Stooges together and to do comedy, all those comedies that they did for not Screen Gems, but I can't think of the name of it now. But and which Curly came first and all that. It was funny, and I'm going, holy criminy, And he said that doing the Stooges in the beginning was a real cutthroat business, because there were people off to the side that were ready to jump right in there if you didn't get it.
Wow. Well, speaking of in your face or slap your face, it wasn't just slapstick. It was clobber Curly on the head 100 times an episode or worse. Anyhow, it is good to laugh. It's good to have a really good laugh. I certainly could use some. I think we all could use some. Uh,
Well, I got to share this because
but,
when Channel 2, KTVU first started,
mhm.
they had, and I mean, as school kids, we would run home because from 5 to 6, it was the Stooges for the first half hour. You'll never guess what the second half an hour was. Amos and Andy, and we loved it. And I mean, and Amos and Andy was just incredibly funny, and you didn't see, you really, there was an underlayment on the Amos and Andy of the only one that could ever put one over on the Kingfish was a white guy. That was the underlayment, and then and all that. But you never thought of that the humor was meant to demean.
Mm.
I mean, you had lines like the Kingfish saying to Andy Brown, "You haven't got sense enough to come out of the rain." And Andy says, "Oh yes, I does. I've done it lots of times."
Yeah. I don't have too much memory of Amos and Andy beyond a name. I don't think I ever.
Oh God.
Our family was one of the last families on the block to get a TV set, let alone a color TV set. But I do remember.
Wow.
I do remember the Little Rascals.
Oh
And,
yeah.
how, in some ways, how innocent and happy their little clan of kids were, including Buckwheat, and and they were all just, it was a kind of a real statement of youthful America. It seemed like, those kids were all going to be kids playing together. And,
Right. What was in my case, it was like growing up on the block that I grew up on.
Yeah.
Because we had a ton of kids, and it was, we had a ton of parents. Well, the dads had fought in World War II, including one family, Japanese family, around the corner from us. The dad showed off all his medals. He had 3 Purple Hearts and a Silver Star.
Wow.
So he was in the all Nisei division that went into Anzio,
Italy.
and
one of the
just
most highly decorated units or whatever in the entire World War II.
right,
Incredible story.
yeah,
People have to, for the younger generation, if anybody in the younger generation is stuck with me and Rick through our little chat here, and you're still listening to these old guys talk, you got to know that this positive streak in America that hopefully I know is still in you, because otherwise you wouldn't be here, obviously, listening.
right.
It was always there too. It was there on
Right.
the street corners. It was there in neighborhoods, and there was I think an idealistic sense that wanted to work its way through both in the innocent days of, let's call it innocent days of Hollywood, as well as in our daily lives. And of course, there's always the people who are afraid, or those who are such narrow-minded people that actually think that that your culture or your race really made a difference. But I think there was a great many people who just really enjoyed the good company of having anybody, particularly because they were different, particularly because it's like, wow, whether it be the color of your skin up against mine is different or whatever, it just made it more enjoyable. I think there was lots of people. It's a story that still goes through the country.
Well, the thing that got me about growing up on our block, on one end of the block, we had a Mrs. Luda. And Mrs. Luda was, I don't know how she and my grandmother got talking about the war, but Mrs. Luda, all of a sudden, my grandmother was talking about it. She said, well, I know the family up the block that they came here right after Kristallnacht in 37. And they had relatives that got killed in the camps. And Mrs. Luda says to my grandmother, she says, well, before everything started, she said, the Jews had everything. And my grandmother her mouth hung open. And it was weird. And that was the one and only time that this woman down at the end of the block opened her mouth about the war.
And what she was saying when she said they had everything,
Yeah.
You're suggesting that, what I have in my mind what you're suggesting, but tell me, what do you?
Oh yeah, well, it was an equivalency saying, well, of course, everything that happened was going to happen because they had everything, which was incredible. You just want to go, wow, this person is actually living on the block. It's just too much.
There are memories of America in the 40s, not in the 40s, but in the 50s and 60s, but our knowledge of that time. We have to charge up our sense of belief and idealism, and it's very, really difficult these days because it just seems like there's so much stuff out of control. I'll tell you what, I'm going to wind up with one quote from I don't know if I should or not, but here I started it, so I will. This was a story about corporate welfare. Another one, a little link. And it's about all this big money being spent on these giant government programs. And, if it sounds like tend to be a Republican, that's right, people. There's some element about just when you put these giant programs in motion, it's what they used to call in the Reagan era, trickle down. It's like this stuff is going to somehow get down to people. But so the quote from the article says, President Joe Biden says that the handouts will, here's what President Joe Biden says the handouts will, quote, put more money in your pockets, end of quote. Speaker Nancy Pelosi claims they will, quote, protect the planet for the children, quote. But the author says, but a disproportionate amount of the money will end up in the hands of big companies and the ones with the most lawyers and lobbyists.
Amen.
And that's sad because that's kind of the vision of Joe Biden and Pelosi as being supposedly the party of the people. They feel like they're doing this for the people, and yet it seems like it's we're missing the boat in terms of how to really help, in my mind, the people that when they throw money at these giant projects. I don't know.
Well, look at, for instance, look at all the giant conglomerates, Huawei, that are connected with China, and look at what happened the other day. They went into the dumper for $200 billion in a real estate trust, and but there are plenty. The thing that's so frightening is there are plenty of Americans ready, willing, and able to work with these folks, counter their government. And Huawei is an example. There were so many people that worked on the U.S. to accept them as the ones that were going to bring in the iPhone 5. They were going to be the carriers. But what you didn't realize was those carriers could also take secure lines and just stream them back to China. But yet there are plenty of people willing to work for that end. I've seen the one example that just drove me out of my mind was at the end of Reagan's term, Alexander Haig, Mr. Big General, Secretary of State, the whole bit.
Big hawk.
Who he goes out there, and who does he work for? The Communist Chinese. First thing out of the box. And I'm going, wow. This, don't you have enough?
That's it. That's it right there. Don't you have enough? And that's the message for our way through this issues and dealing with storage and stuff and all the stuff that you have and I have and that our children have. And how can we say no to having more stuff at various times, that all that stuff is not going to be worth it? How much stuff do you need? And I feel like that's the passage through among many, steps for the next generation. And maybe it's just simply because things are starting to unravel more, and we've got some difficult times up ahead in the next 10 years, the way I see it. But
yeah. Well, how many of these folks retire and say to themselves, I want to be Mother Teresa. I want to be Gandhi. Not too many.
Well, I'm not sure I would recommend Bezos giving $1 billion to an environmental fund. Yes, on one hand, you go, okay, I hope, but why do I not trust that it's necessarily? I think everything starts local, Rick, and the whole evolution or revolution or whatever you want to call it, if we could wish for a transition in our world to health and sustainability, is going to come through a kind of a cultural community of people who just feel like, I don't need all that extra. I don't want to sell my backyard. I don't need to sell the quality of life of my community in order to get rich.
Right.
Somehow.
Yeah. Maybe somebody who invents a second Peace Corps. I mean, Kennedy was right on with that. That was.
Yeah. And for me too, and you and all of us to maybe we don't have to get here comes one, a member of your Peace Corps.
She's volunteering.
Okay.
We're zooming.
Nice.
Hey. You came just in time. You're part of the Peace Corps, and Rick and I. And I was just saying, you don't need to apply for a card or get like anything. It's somehow we got to just, we're it. You're part of the Peace Corps.
Okay, I'm a member, huh?
Okay. All right. Hey, listen, Rick, I think we're going to wrap it up with that.
Okay.
Cheery note. And,
yeah.
I gotta do a couple.
Oh, okay.
It's good to see you.
All right.
I'm going to meet you.
Peace, love, music, and happiness.
For sure.
Okay.
All right. Talk later, Rick.
Okay. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.